Using the power of joy to optimize work-life integration. Today, we are speaking with an amazingly joyful woman, Anne Scottlin, and I cannot wait for you guys to meet her. So let's go.
My name is Eva Payne. Welcome to The Flow Life, where we define love as live open, value everything. On this podcast, you are dialed in and set to love. Let's go for a ride.
Good morning, Anne.
Good morning. How are you, Eva?
I am doing so good. I am so excited to have you on the show. I have been following you on Twitter along with hundreds of thousands of other people. I don't know how you have like so many followers and you post constantly and they're all so amazing. So for anyone out there who doesn't follow you already, is it just Anne Scottlin? Is that your Twitter
It's just
handle?
Anne Scottlin. I got lucky because I'm the only one. So
that's awesome. Well,
Yeah.
They're beautiful posts. They're very well thought out. And then I was thinking, like, does she just come up with this stuff, or is she like putting so? It seems very intuitive to me. Like you're just sort of in the moment, and something kind of inspires you, and so you create a post. But I could totally be wrong in your process there. But it's super motivational and inspiring. So thank you so much for doing that work and putting that beauty into the world.
Yeah, thank you. It's fun. It gives me a lot of pleasure to do the writing. It's almost kind of my own meditation. And yeah, I draw from, what's going on in my own life, but also, over the last decade in the wellness and motivation businesses, emotional wellness. I've had a lot of clients. I've coached a lot of people, taught a lot of groups. And so a lot of times I love those real meaty questions that come up. Like the questions that people are usually afraid they're going to get asked. I love to have those asked because I like to just tackle them. And a lot of times what will come up in those moments, real legitimate, hard questions or life situations will give me a lot of food for thought. And I'll kind of like cogitate on that for a while. And a lot of those posts also come out of that because I feel like it's real, authentic stuff that we deal with every day.
You know what? I'm the same way when I'm working with someone or I talk to someone and then I feel like, gosh, it still sits with me for a minute, or two or three. And then I start thinking of even better responses after I've got off the phone with someone. So I'm like, I need to create a post about this after it's been like more thought out. So, okay, Anne, tell people more about you before we jump into talking about optimizing joy in the work life. Just what is your background? I mean, I know you touched on it just a tiny, tiny bit, but let people know a little bit more about you.
Wow. Thank you. That's always sort of like a special opportunity. We don't get to talk about ourselves that much.
Please tell me all about yourself.
Yeah. Well, a little bit different. So I grew up in the Pacific Northwest. I was born into an extremely conservative religious family. I grew up way out in the middle of nowhere, like literally, like no friends. I was homeschooled till I was 15 and a half. And then I went to private religious schools, very small schools after that, and just had a very strange journey kind of growing up American. I have a lot of friends in India and other countries around the world, and they're like, we were watching Baywatch. And I'm like, yeah, we didn't have a TV. And they're just like, what? And so one of the little things, I'm going to drop joy in this because that's my favorite topic. I feel like joy can be used in so many ways. Joy can be used as an expression of your spiritual experience. Joy can be used as an expression of just your genuine emotional wellness of who you are as a human being. In the environment I grew up, joy was sort of expected, but I didn't feel joyful. So instead, I felt like a failure a lot because I'm like, well, I'm doing all the right things. I'm doing everything I'm being told to do, wearing what I'm supposed to wear, all these things. But I'm not really happy. I feel this like kind of depression, dread, restlessness. And it was really hard for me. And later in life, after some very bizarre relationships and some other things, I started saying, okay, now I need to stop trying to please everyone else. I need to start focusing on what's my meaning and purpose in life? What's my vision? Because I just got so lost out in pleasing people, whether it was my ex-spouse or my environment, my church, my community. And I'm like, No, I want to find what's my joy. Like what makes me tick? What makes me want to get up in the morning? And it took a long time, like at least 5 years and more as a journey, kind of fleshing this out. And then as I did that, I realized I started getting really excited once I started tapping into my joy, which we can talk about
Mm.
later. And
I
that
want to know, wait,
came
let me
by
ask you really quick. Can I
and
ask you, was that hard to transition away from like what you had always known or what you had always identified as, knowing that like this path isn't making me happy, but this is all I know.
yeah.
These are the labels, these are the identities that I'm holding on to because whether they were given to you or whatever, it's all you knew. So what like was there a catalyst? Was there a moment or was it just like this slow decline
Mm.
until you thought, "Oh my gosh, I have to do something else?" Or what caused or led you into being able to shift out of those identities into pursuing what you wanted to pursue?
Yeah. It took a long time. And for me, I'm a very passionate person. For anyone who's into science, I'm a Capricorn. Like I'm devoted, committed kind of person. Like that's, I don't just drop things and don't change directions on a dime. So it was a long, excruciating process, honestly, because I'm an intellectual type of person, but I also am a committed person to what I grew up in or the relationships I was in or whatever that was. And so I always had this deep frustration of disconnect. So it took a long time. It took a really traumatic divorce and a few other things that kind of catapulted me into that space. You know, they say, well, you sometimes you can't start building till you lose it all. Well, that's kind of how it felt to me.
Mhm.
None of the dots were connecting anymore, and it was and I feel for anyone who's come from similar backgrounds or even similar issues where you feel like you don't have the dots connecting because you just feel so lost. You just feel like you're
Yeah.
floating out in space and you don't know what you're supposed to be connected to or who you are. But literally, the drama of several of those experiences that I went through was what pushed me to say, well, if I'm going to be here functioning in this world, then I have to find a reason and it has to be worth it.
Mm.
And so, for me, part of that was getting out of my shell again, reaching out, finding ways to, help others and then starting to kind of not deny the things that make me happy, that make me tick,
Mm.
regardless of what other people say. It's like, no, you don't have to be a doormat. You can own it, do it, but that for me, those were learned behaviors. So,
Yeah, that's probably a really crazy transition. I know, for me, I kept saying when I was in that transition of life, I'd say, "I feel like I'm a college student without a major." Like, I'm just taking all these classes, I have 0 idea which way I'm going, and I just thought, like, I'm just gonna pursue joy. That's just what I kept saying, like, "What brings me joy?" Because at this stage of my life, I didn't want to do something. I didn't want to spend any more time doing something that wasn't in alignment with just who I was. Even though I didn't know who I was, I knew that as I brought something in, it like either felt good or didn't. And if it didn't, I'd be like, okay, no thanks. And then I'd try something else. And then, does that feel right? Does that feel good? Okay, no thanks. And so that's probably how I found you, looking
yeah,
for
no, that's
positive
amazing.
people online, like who's someone good out there who's sharing some like positive messages because
Yeah.
it's really difficult when you're
Mhm.
going through those transitions and you're feeling like you've lost or you're losing who you were and you're kind of
Mhm.
becoming someone new.
Yeah. And there was a really weird interim. I mean, I had a variety of very different early kind of careers, stabs at different careers, and wasn't feeling the fit. And then after graduate school, I got kind of caught up in graduate school in the acting scene. So I thought, this is interesting. And so the first time in my life, I felt like I could fully express myself without judgment because if I was in character, you're doing your job, which I thought was pretty good. And I mean, I wasn't really thinking through that, but it was really attracted me. And so I spent many years in the acting industry. I moved to LA for that reason. Just, really tapping into my creative self, which was something that was kind of suppressed to the way I grew up. It
Mhm.
was like, you had a mission of whatever it was, but it wasn't to, I'm an artistic and creative person. And to express that was sort of a waste of time. I know other people can relate to this with parents that are tough, either academically or professionally or whatever that was. And that was a huge growing space for me. I don't necessarily recommend it. It was also an excruciating kind of industry to just drop yourself into the middle of the ocean and try to swim. But I learned so much about myself. And, I just felt like the universe brought me some teachers and mentors who were working not with just my skill set, as an actress, but also as a human being. I started kind of coming out of that shell. I started owning my joy, being a little more fearless and caring a little less of what other people thought. So again, a weird chapter in my journey, but something that did bring me joy. And I mean, I still do some of that actually as well, but it kind of opened me up to be able to step into my power. And I'm very grateful for that chapter.
Speaking of chapters, one of the chapters in your book, Live for Joy, you talk about creativity. Let me see what you said. Where did I write that one down at? Is it listen? No, it's not listen to your inner genius, but I do think that one is really important too. Here, connect to your creative force.
Yes.
Your creative force. So what does that mean to you when you say connect to your creative force?
Well, it actually ties in quite a lot with joy. I feel like joy is something that we're born with. It's something that most of us are born with as a young child, as a baby, that kind of unbridled joy, that just playing and laughing and screaming and giggling just cause, and not caring who's watching, being able to play and create and just being free and not having to fit the mold yet. It starts early, but you still have this time where you're able to just be. And for most human beings, not all, but I think creativity can be anyone from an incredibly brilliant scientist all the way to someone who's painting, right? It can be, we all are creative beings. I think it's part of what we are as human. Well, I say joy is our birthright, and creativity is very close to that, because for most people, it is an expression of joy. It's an expression of, maybe your job is just bleh, but it's the job you've been doing for your whole life and it definitely pays the bills. You don't want to leave that, but maybe you've abandoned, maybe when you were a teenager, you liked painting, or you did woodwork, or you wanted to be a writer, and who says you can't be more than one thing, especially in this world we live in now? Mm-hmm. So I say, connect to that creative force, because it's its own, has this very healing power, has a very brightening power. And you'll know what your thing is when you do it, and you really makes you feel amazing when you're doing that activity. I don't care whether it's cooking or riding horses or, but especially where you're using your imagination to kind of pull out, I think, connecting to who we are so deeply. I've actually never thought of it quite like this. Connecting to who you really are, finding out, who am I really? A lot of that you can discover by tapping into your creative side, your creative force, because you're very unique in that way. And it's not about, doing what your boss makes you do. It's about doing what makes you who you are. So that's why I talk a lot about the creative force and the power of your imagination, and how much it connects us not only to ourselves, but also to each other.
So let me ask you this. So what if there's someone, hypothetically, who has spent, like you, spent a lot of time in school, got a master's degree, did a bunch of stuff, and spent however many years in their career, and now they're, in their late 30s, early 40s, and their job is not bringing them a lot of joy, or maybe parts of it are. Mm-hmm. There are parts that they really do still like, but they just feel really drained at the end of the day. They're coming home and it's just like they want to just vent, they want to just release whatever has gone on during that day. What would you say to someone in that position? Could you quit your job? Do you find a new way to do your job? Do you bring in more creativity? What would someone do in that position?
This is such a great question. I'm so glad you asked it, because this is what I've been working with a lot of my coaching clients for over a decade. Because of my background, I worked with a lot of creatives. And then because of my business background before that, I also worked with a lot of business people. So I kind of get to see both sides of this coin all the time. And, for the business person, I think it really depends on one, what's at stake. Like, are you younger and single, or even older and single, or, and you have the opportunity to literally drop your career.
Mhm.
If you're young, I'm always, being very careful with the people I coach. I'm like, listen, the starving artist thing is real. I knew lots of people living in their cars in LA who were attending acting classes with me. Like, that's just mind blowing. It's a thing. So I'm like, okay, let's find, and this is again kind of work-life integration. So if you want to talk about your creative and artistic side, getting exercise, being healthy, really breathing, then how do you work that into your real life? So for some of my clients who are actors and artists that have another skill, I say, okay, let's get you a remote job. Let's find you a job that works, that you can work from home, do your own hours, and then practice your, be able to go on auditions, or be able to take the time to get your writing in every day, or whatever that is.
Mhm.
And then if it's someone who, if you feel like your job is killing you, then seriously look at alternatives. Again, it's expectations of ourselves, even not just the ones, parents and society and our bosses put on us. But, if you can reevaluate. But if you can't, then go home. Some people, it's just like cooking an amazing, beautiful meal makes them happy. Or like, you might live in an apartment, but you have 6 potted plants on your porch and you love to just play with them and make, grow tomatoes. It could be taking time on the weekends to maybe go out in nature, if that's something that really connects and inspires you. And it does me. You've seen my posts, so and then you take time to write, write stories, write poetry, just kind of expressing that, whatever it is, in those off hours. Because I'll just drop this in at the end. I love TV and I'm an actress, but TV is like such a drug. It's such a numbing agent. And I watch some almost every day, but I watch less and less, not out of a discipline, but because I enjoy what I'm doing so much more. And so when you start to see that change, that transition in your life, you kind of know you're on the right track. You're making your own life instead of just watching someone else's.
I love that. Do you think that I ponder this a lot? Do you believe that there is I don't want to say right job, but that there is a path for everyone where it's not just the stuff on the outside of your job that brings you joy, but it's your job that brings you
Mhm.
joy, that like you are here to fill a need. You're here to contribute to the world. There's something for you to
Mhm.
do that will make you feel good, that will fill you up with joy. Do you believe
Mhm.
that's true for everyone? And if so, how do we like, where does that start outside of, like you said, creativity? But if you really are in that place where you're like, I don't know.
Mhm. Yeah. So basically, exploration around making a career change
Mhm.
is, that's one alternative. Um, uh, Setting up your lifestyle so your job isn't the center anymore. I always encourage people to do a good job. I'm a perfectionist. It's one of my weaknesses. But like, some people will I have, clients in Silicon Valley who they do their job like at 130%. They would sleep 4 hours a night. Like,
Yeah.
I'm like, you could probably keep your job even if you were doing 85%, but you're killing yourself on a job that's just functional. I mean, it does give you satisfaction. You get a sense of completion with what you do. You've been trained to do what you do. But that's out of balance. You got to start taking care. What in the world is life for? Even if you have the money, right?
Mhm.
And as far as finding one job, I think that it's, the world is not always fair. Not everyone can find their dream job, but you can rebalance. I have people who work for humanitarian organizations and travel around the world like 4 times a year. And that gives
Mm,
them so much motivation and pleasure and enjoyment and a sense of fulfillment and purpose and satisfaction that even though they're an accountant, the rest of the time they're fine.
yeah.
Like, this is what I do to support my vision, which is helping women around the world in developing countries, whatever that is, right? So they're like, because I am fulfilling my vision, my job is a means to an end, and I might not be that person who gets to have the dream job of a lifetime, but it's okay because I'm complete. and I
Mhm.
can fund this that I want to do. As opposed, you can also be a starving artist and be able to give very little back
True.
and be just
Okay.
thriving.
So let me ask you this then. So let's say you're not someone in your 30s or 40s, but now you're 18, 19, 20,
Mhm.
21, and you have every option potentially, right, in front of you. What advice do you give that person? What advice do you give to that person who really has very little commitment out in the world yet and can pursue anything? Where do they start?
Yeah. I think it's I think it's not quite as romantic as they want me to say, and I do have a lot of, clients that are in their early 20s, and I love them. I love them. I love their energy. I love their attitude. Um, so having the dream job is great, and there's no reason you should say no. But here's my suggestion: you're young, you have this opportunity. Find a job that pays well, preferably something that's flexible, like maybe it's full time and you get benefits, but you can work from home. You can work whatever hours you need to work,
Mhm.
and then pursue your vision. And when your personal mission, your vision, your creative outlet, your artistic side, if and when you're fortunate enough to be making more money doing that than you are in your day job, then drop the day job. But don't do it until then, because otherwise, you know what can happen, and I've seen it. You'll get so discouraged, you'll get so broke, you'll throw it all out, baby with the bathwater, and like, I'm just going to go work in a cubicle for the rest of my life. I'm not going to pursue my creative vision anymore. And that is just heartbreaking to me. Like, no, 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 no. Let's be practical. Let's take care of ourselves, pursue your vision. And if you get to that spot where you can shift over, go for it. But
Mhm.
don't count on, not everyone can be, a famous movie star. So you can still
Right,
do
right.
acting, but you might want to have a day job too.
Now what would you say to someone like, let's say that day job, I mean, they like it, it's well enough, but they're not even sure. So I've seen this. So like whether it's someone like my mom who's in her 60s who says,
Mhm,
I don't even know what I like anymore. Or I have a
mhm,
friend who's been in a really challenging marriage her entire life
mhm,
since she was 16
mhm,
and she's in her 50s and is
mhm,
leaving that marriage soon and has no
mhm,
idea what she even likes anymore.
mhm.
Or you're 18
Yeah.
and you've kind of been told, like you were, this
Mhm,
is who you are, this is your life, blah, blah, blah. So you don't
mhm,
even know who you are. Where does someone like that start when you don't even know who you are or what you like?
mhm. What moves you deeply and
Mm,
what brings you joy? It could be for some person as simple as their happiest place they are is working with dogs. Okay, so either start pursuing that as either a career or as your volunteer work every week, where you help with your local humane society and you volunteer, or you whatever, like find. Or is it, maybe your real passion is travel. Well, you may not have the budget to just travel recreationally 365 days a year, but how can you find opportunities to work and travel? Find it, make it happen, but do it with a business plan in mind. And this is why I've always, like, again, the merging of the business and the creative side.
mhm,
Come up with a plan. If you don't know how to do that, find a coach, find a mentor, find someone who's done what you want to do, and get coached by them, learn from them, set up a plan, set up a budget, and figure it out. But find what moves you. If you're 60 and you always wanted to have your own bake shop, then do it. But have a business plan, do the financials, figure it out, go for it. Like,
mhm.
find what moves you and brings you joy, because life is short enough, but we need to be smart about it, because I can be as much of a dreamer as the next person. I'm a romantic, I'm a creative, so I can get hopelessly lost down that track. But if you want to sustain it, if you want to sustain your joy around that, doing that, and if you want to make a difference in your world, you have to be practical and you have to plan. So just get some support. There's so much out there. You can find someone, you can ask me, someone can ask you, and we can point them in the right direction.
Mhm. Absolutely. The last point that I want to bring up, and then I want to ask you if there's anything else that you want to bring up, but I loved your section on expand your perspective. And I'm thinking, like, when you think inside of a box and you think, oh, I could never start that bakery, or I wouldn't even know what to do with dogs. I just know I love them.
Right.
What does that mean to you? Expand your perspective, and how can someone do that?
I mean, a big part of it is trying to get rid of all the messages, set aside the messages we've been fed since we were very young. This is who you are. This is what you should do. This is because you grew up in a certain place or in a certain environment. This is all you're qualified for. You know, I kind of grew up for random reasons with this idea that I could never be a mathematician or a scientist or a surgeon. I just didn't feel like that was like I wasn't taught like that I had that capability, right? So just lay that stuff aside and say, if I were to look at everything differently, if I were to interview people, ask people, find out what makes other people tick, what makes them, having an open mind is like the greatest gift you can ever give yourself. Most people hear that, oh, have an open mind. Well, then you're threatening my opinions about the world. And like, yeah, but what if you discovered something that was amazing and magical that you would have always shut out just trying to be right? And that's one of my biggest pet peeves is people determined to be right about something and missing these opportunities for exploration, joy, creativity, new careers, anything. And I have this one I'm going to share with you, this
Please
one
do.
quote. So it shows the image. And if your clients don't know, this whole book is quotes opposite amazing art and photography. So
I
the
love it.
apple is looking in the mirror and seeing a core. And what it says is, we believe our perspectives are truths, yet they're merely reflections of our own interpretations. So we believe our perspectives are truths, but they are really only interpretations of our own perspective. Because how others see us, how others see our potential, what we could do in the world is not as limited, but we have to take a step back and be willing to open our mind and explore. And guess what? Being an explorer is fun.
Oh my gosh, Anne, I love you. I am so glad that you're out there in the world doing what you're doing. Thank you so much for coming on the show and for sharing that. Your book is beautiful, by the way. I mean, I see it back there, and how perfect for you. It just makes perfect sense. Like, here you are putting these beautiful images in the world with these great quotes that you come up with, and then you just said, I don't know, let's make it a book,
Why
so that can just, why not? Put it on coffee tables and just add that joy into your home. And so where can people get your book, and where can people connect with you?
Sure. So you can connect with me on my website, which is annescottlin.com. That's ANNESCOTTLIN, not the country, Scottlin, annescottlin.com. The book is on there. If you want to order it directly, though, you can go to Amazon. You'll probably find a link in the notes here. And there's a Kindle version, a paperback, the hardcover. The hardcover is freaking gorgeous because it's such a highly illustrated book. And yeah, this was something that my followers were asking me to put together, and I did. And because it's divided up in 12 chapters, you can find what you're looking for that day or in that moment. I really wanted a book that was about self-empowerment, but even if you only had a minute or two, you could have something to really chew on for the rest of the day, something to kind of like get your engines going. So a lot of people love keeping it by their bedside or on their desk, or as you said, on a coffee table. So check it out, Amazon.com. Anne Scottlin, the book, again, is called Live for Joy, and it is beautiful. It's hardcover. It's like 285 pages. So check it out and share the joy.
I love it. And any final thoughts? Any final thoughts on joy, on pursuing your joy, on that work-life integration before we head out for our audience today?
Absolutely. When you have that day where you're just in a terrible mood, when things go wrong in life, when you're frustrated, when you have issues at work or issues in relationships, take a step back. And yes, you can meditate and all those things, which are wonderful, wonderful tools, but also think like, what really matters to me? What really brings me joy? And give yourself a chance to express that every single day. And as it becomes a habit, you'll really start to see your life transform. So check in for more on that, but that would be my parting words.
I love it, Anne. Thank you so much for coming on this
Thank
show and
you.
just for being such a bright light in this world and just on this podcast today.
Oh,
I really appreciate your time. And thank you, everyone, for watching and for being a part of Set to Love. And if you know someone who could use a little bit more joy in their life, then forward on this podcast, have them check out Anne, find one of her posts, screenshot it, send it to them. She's not hard to find. Thank you again so much. I really appreciate you being here.
thanks, Eva.
Bye, everyone. Have a great day. See you next Monday with another fabulous guest. Stay set to love so you can flow for life. Love you.